And then I will hit the broadcast button in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, well, welcome to everyone for the presidential address.
No, not yet.
2021 presidential address.
Yeah.
For the LSA annual meeting occurring on this Tuesday night. Somewhat unusual, but it's been an unusual year. Let me first of all introduce myself. I'm Brian Joseph. I'll be introducing our speaker, Marianne Mithun. Just a few ground rules. This is a Zoom webinar. We will, after the introduction, Marianne will speak, and then we'll have a question session after for about 10 or 15 minutes. The questions should be typed into the Q&A part of the Zoom window, and then we will field them after that and turn them over to Marianne to answer. At the moment, there are no open questions, but that you can, if you have questions as the address goes on, you can type them in there, or you can wait till the end as you wish. Okay, so it's my really great pleasure to introduce Marianne tonight. Let me start by saying that geologists and meteorologists talk about 100-year events, the sort of thing that occurs to such an intensity and rarity as it is due to the chance events that happen and only once in 100 years, 1 in a 100-year occurrence. It's usually used with respect to such weather-related events as floods and rainfalls. But we know all too well that it extends to other kinds of crises, as we have literally had a once-in-a-century attack by a virus in the last 12 months. And in fact, a confluence of horrible events defined 2020 for the LSA, not quite a century. There was the threat of illness and devastation for just about all members, the worst fiscal crisis of the LSA's existence, the disruption to our daily academic routines, forcing the LSA to scramble to hold its virtual annual meeting. Ultimately a great success, I would say, but it took a lot of work. And external events that highlighted racial injustices and inequities that embroiled the LSA in divisive controversy. As an aside, we might well say that this last was not just a once in 100 event, nor even once in 401 year event, but an ongoing outrage that was thrust into a wider and yet more focused view. So this has been a 1 in 100 year, and it has been very fortunate, if we can use that word in talking about 2020, that we have had a 1 in 100 person at the head of the LSA for the last 12 months, Marianne Mithun. I thought that my time as president last year, 2019 that is, was tough, but in retrospect, the LSA affairs that occupied my time, such as how to fix the website that we all love to hate, what to do about open access, how to respond to the restructuring of relevant programs at the NSF and the like, they were nothing compared to 2020 and compared to what Marianne has had to deal with. So it is good that we have had a remarkable person as our leader during this past year. And what a leader. She's been at the forefront of linguistics for years, literally. Not only has she been a leader of the LSA, but she also served as president of our European counterpart, the Societas Linguistica Europea. And as if 2 presidencies were not enough, she has also been president of 2 other professional organizations, the Association for Linguistic Typology and the Society for Linguistic Anthropology. In fact, she's the only person in the history of the world to hold these posts on both sides of the Atlantic, 2014 for the SLE and now 2020 for the LSA. And since the SLE is in its 55th year now, counting the LSA's years and the SLE's years together, we see that she is indeed rarer than 1 in 100 president-wise. I can vouch further that she was a super vice president during my presidential year in 2019, and now it is her turn to be in the spotlight and my turn to support her. It's an easy enough task, given how stellar she is. I first met Marianne in 1986 at a workshop on linguistic reconstruction organized by Sally Thomason and Terry Kaufman at the University of Pittsburgh. But our paths had crossed more than a decade earlier. We actually go farther back than 1986, as she is a fellow Yaley. We intersected in New Haven as I was getting my BA as a linguistics major in 1973, and she was doing her graduate work with an MA in 1972 and then a PhD in 1974. We were thus sort of classmates at Yale, at least insofar as occupying the same space on campus, the LingSem and HGS, Marianne, if you remember. Though not quite at the same time, at least not as far as I remember. I was a cute undergraduate senior who was hitting the books hard up there, Marianne, in case your memory needs a nudge. She is, to use a trite but apt phrase, a linguist's linguist, with practical skills in numerous languages, fieldwork experience with a huge number, a specialist with a deep knowledge of a whole language family, Iroquoian, and by all measures, a serious scholar. She's an accomplished researcher, author of some 200 articles and 3 major books, editor of several more, best known for her work in typology and diachronic morphology and syntax, especially pertaining to polysynthesis, noun incorporation, and argument structure, drawing largely on Iroquoian, but also her deep knowledge of numerous other languages as well, showcased most tellingly in her monumental volume in the Cambridge University Press Green Series, The Languages of Native North America, for which she won the LSA's Bloomfield Award as the best book in our field in 2002. And speaking of awards, she has garnered all kinds of honors over her long and illustrious career. Not 1, but 2 honorary doctorates from the University of Oslo and La Trobe University, the Yale Wilbur Cross Medal for Distinguished Alumni. She was named as a fellow of the LSA. She's a member of the Norwegian Academy of Sciences and Letters, holder of multiple NSF grants and other grants from major national agencies, among many others. And I will bet, knowing her, that the one that she is most proud of is the University Distinguished Teaching Award that she won at Santa Barbara in 2007. She is generous with her time and attention to her students and colleagues, who put together a festschrift for her that was presented at an LSA meeting a few years ago in recognition of that. Finally, let me close by stating for the record that Marianne is one of the nicest guys in our field, a true mensch, to use the Yiddish masculine form in its American Jewish English bigendered guise, someone I'm honored to consider a true friend. So please join me in welcoming Marianne to the podium for her presidential address, someone who has made a real difference in our field, speaking on In Celebration of the Differences. Marianne.
Brian, I'm so touched. Thank you. That's much more than I deserve. I really appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. This has been a challenging year for everybody all around, all of us. And I'm especially grateful for my colleagues, and particularly, I think we're all really fortunate to have had such an outstanding executive committee this year. These are amazing individuals. They're people with really good ideas outside the box. And on top of that, they listen to each other, and that's really, really valuable. And they care about the LSA and they care about the field. I'm deeply grateful for that and for all of my colleagues. So let me get started here. Let's see here. Okay. Today I'm talking about In Celebration of the Differences. And as we all know, essential parts of scholarship are discerning patterns, I would say most of us think this way, and positing general principles, okay? But sometimes this search for general principles can let us kind of throw away the differences, the things that aren't working, as maybe they're not really pertinent. And today I'm going to talk about the fact that sometimes these differences can be important and make our field richer. Richer on a lot of sides. For one thing, they can be very important for communities. I'm talking about differences across languages here. They can provide tools for structuring our world. They're a central part of intellectual and cultural heritage. And they can have very powerful social value in shared specialness. So there are a lot of kinds of differences, and I think our field is getting better and better at focusing on them. There are differences across languages, across dialects, across speakers, across moments when people are speaking, and I think we're getting more and more tuned into them and to their importance. They also can give us a deeper understanding of language in general. And I think if we jump too soon, we can miss out on some deeper generalizations and some potential explanations. Different languages can contribute different tools for pushing back apparent arbitrariness. And I think we're getting better at this all the time. So one question, the main question I'm asking today is, do speakers of all languages distribute their ideas over structure in the same way? I think in our field, we've made really great strides in understanding, sort of identifying structures, different kinds of structures, and how they can vary cross-linguistically. I'm just going to focus on one little kind, and actually a subtle piece of it, complement constructions. There have been great strides in sort of typological understanding of what complement constructions are and how they can vary cross-linguistically. So everybody knows what a complement construction is. It's when you have an argument of a clause that's another clause. So like we have, he saw a bug and you've got an object, or he saw that he had finished and you've got another object, but it's a clause. So that's an object complement. Okay, or politeness is important, or it's important that you be polite. So we have this subject, that you be polite is important. Okay, so those are complement constructions. Some great progress was made by Mickey Noonan, who did wonderful typological work looking all over the world. And he came up with a list of the kinds of verbs that tend to act like matrix verbs in complement taking constructions. So he says you have utterance verbs, you have propositional attitude verbs, like all of these you can see. There are pretense verbs, imagine, pretend. Commentative verbs, regret, I'm sad that, it's odd that. Knowledge verbs, I know that, discovered that. Fear verbs, I'm afraid that. Desideratives, I wish that, I hope that. Modal verbs, okay, we know all about those. Achievement verbs, she managed to do this. Phasal ones, start, continue, finish, etc. And immediate perception, see, hear, watch, feel. So this was monumental work. It was published first in 1995, and then he went and it got republished again. And so here it is in the 2007 version. And it's very easy to find these across languages. So just to take an example at random, here's Mohawk. This is the Iroquoian language family. There's Cherokee down here. This is Tuscarora at contact, Susquehannock, and then the Five Nations and Wendat up here. There's Mohawk. It's in New York State, Quebec, and Ontario. This is one of the Mohawk communities, Kahnawake. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's in Quebec, so it's got winters. Okay, so you can find Mohawk complements. So she says, I remember once I took care of my little brother. It's perfect. We've got a matrix and we've got a nice object complement. So I remember once I put my mind on him, I have him as younger sibling. These are languages that don't have very many nouns, actually. So the way you say my little brother is actually transitive. Okay, this is what you could call holophrasis in a narrow sense, and that is that all verbs contain pronominal prefixes identifying their core arguments, so any one can be used on its own. So you could just say gay, and that would be I remember it, and that's perfectly good. So you have the core arguments everywhere. Here's the I, here's the I, him, here's the I, him. Okay, this language also has noun incorporation, so you slip noun stems into verbs, and so the way she was saying I was minding my brother, you have incorporated mind in there. Okay, this complement construction, this is the pitch pattern, okay, and you can see actually everything here is a totally finite verb, so everything, well, no, that's not a verb, but these things could be perfectly good sentences in themselves. But you can see that the structure here because of the prosody. So there's just juxtaposition and prosodic integration. Yeah, so you can see that. This has a tone distinction, so you get this steep fall because of that falling tone. Okay, so it looks fine, no problem. That's the speaker. But there are some surprises if you actually let people talk. So the question is, how would you say he's done well? So she was saying, yeah, his son's now running the golf course. It's this big deal. Buildings here and there, many things started up. There's a restaurant. And then she said, it's good how he's going. And the other person in the conversation translated it, he's done well. Okay, so it's not exactly how you might have expected it, but it's got the perfectly good prosody. It's got the prosodic peak here on the matrix, and then you've got this kind of integrated sentence prosodically, and you get a small pitch reset often on the second clause. She was 103 years old at the time. She was a wonderful, wonderful speaker, a wonderful woman. Okay, so here he says our words come out differently. So the question is, okay, how would a Mohawk say this? He said, we're different how our words come out. Okay, and here's the prosody. You can see prosodic peak on the matrix, small pitch reset here on the second clause. So they're not exactly putting things in the places we might expect. That's him. Okay. Then another speaker says, you should have enough brains to blah, 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 blah. Question is, how would you say that if you were a Mohawk? Here's how he said it. He says, it's enough. How he thought has about his stuff. Okay, it's got the nice prosody there. Okay, it's enough how he thinks about it, such stuff. Prosodic peak on the matrix, small pitch reset here. So you can see these speakers are sort of putting their words into constructions we know, but maybe not the places we'd expect them to be. See if you can imagine how a Mohawk would say this. She was talking about her little brother went to church and the priest said, you can't come in. And she said he wasn't dressed correctly. So see if you can figure out how she said that. It's not correct how he's dressed. Yeah. That's Charlotte. Okay, so what are they putting into the matrix? Well, for he's done well, it's good. For our words come out differently, we're different. For he should have had enough brains, enough. Should be enough. Wasn't dressed correctly, it's not correct. So basically what these speakers are doing is they're putting their main information in the matrix. And that gets the prosodic peak too. Okay, now if community goals are to pass along traditional ways of organizing information, and of course we think about, if you're working on strengthening a community language or revitalizing it or reclaiming it, what is it you're trying to get across? And of course, communities vary a lot in what their goals are. But maybe if you're going to be ambitious, and of course they're moving targets, maybe if you're kind of, one of the reasons for keeping this language is traditional ways of thinking, of organizing information, word-by-word translations from English aren't going to help you. Okay. A little more prosody here. Okay, so she was talking about the fact that her niece called her up and said, oh my gosh, I heard on the radio that Annie Daibo had died. And this is Annie Daibo, who laughed, and she said, so I said, there are a lot of Annie Daibos. That's a common name in this community. So it was another Annie Daibo who died. Okay, and here's how she said it. Notice here, the matrix is lower. And then what she said is higher. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, obviously, the important information is here. This is not the main point, okay? Also notice that this word, if you said it by itself, you would say, what gi, okay? Notice how she said, what gi, There's hardly any what gi. Okay, so it's really reduced. That's the real Annie Daibo. Okay, so here Joe Deere was saying, this is where he should have enough brains. He actually had a little bit longer sentence. He said, I'd say he should have enough brains. And so the full form of this is agiru ona. You should have enough brains about those kinds of things. Okay, so listen to the agiru. Notice the I'd say is lower, and that he should have enough brains is where it really takes place. Well, the main point of this wasn't I'd say. This is the main point. And so the prosody is lower. And the prosody and the timing reflect information status. So listen to his agiru. The regular form would be agiru, but he says agiru. Okay. There's what's now a hearsay particle, yagan. If you ask somebody to say it out, carefully, they might say yagan. Okay. So she says, they say they just took him up here. It looks like this is no longer the form that's used for this. The way you would say one says is yagawa. Okay. But you don't hear yagawa here. It gets reduced, but it's also integrated into the clause. It's no longer the main matrix thing. So listen to what she says. That's not a regular, okay. That's Josie. Okay, here we have another reduced matrix. So this is I believe actually it will just happen that we stay alive. Okay, so I guess something will happen to keep us alive. So we actually have a matrix clause here, and then in the complement, we've got a matrix and its own complement. Okay, now, if you were to say these by themselves, this would be igere, and this would be gadi. Nobody ever says that. Gone. Okay, and then here it will happen. Oknayawa. Okay, now listen to this. Okay, here it is. So this is technically the matrix, but not really. What she's really talking about is something will keep us alive, and even it will happen that we stay alive. Yeah, even that one's pretty low. So we've got lower pitch on the matrix and on that matrix, and we've got this reduction, but we also have this kind of chunking. So this igere gadi ga comes out. And if you ask people how many words that is, they don't really know. They may know it's one, anyway, it's just what you say. Okay, so this is what we know happens in language. Basically, the stuff you say the most often can get routinized, and recurring chunks can lose their independence and get sort of put together as a single chunk, and also thought of with a single meaning. And so, yeah, if you ask people what does kirikarigan mean, they'd say, yeah, I guess, okay. Obviously, this is how we get epistemic modality. This is what this is. So it gets smaller. That's what's in Nina. Okay, but speakers have some choices. So here, the matrix, well, she says, I go to bed early, I get up early. So this is the lady who was 103. And actually there were a number of people around. So somebody said, well, what's your secret to being so healthy? She says, well, I go to bed early and I get up early. See if you can imagine how she says that. I'm giving you a hint here. She says, it's early, I go to bed. It's early, I get up. Okay, so this is the matrix, but this is the important stuff. Yeah, okay, so that's important. Okay, now we've got just a little particle that means early. We go to bed, early. Yeah. Now, what's the difference? Well, here she was talking about what people did when she was little for Christmas, and she was saying, well, on Christmas Eve, they'd put us to bed, early, the regular time, and then they'd get us up again. So the important point wasn't the early; it's that we go to bed, and then they'd put us up again, get us up again. Okay, here she says, I learned French really fast. Okay, well, she'd been just said recently, well, they taught us French at the school she was at. And then she says, yeah, and I really learned pretty fast. Okay, so the new information here is the fast. Yeah, okay. No surprise, that's the matrix. Okay, that's Josie. But there's also stuff, other particles that are quickly. So this speaker came from another community, and suddenly she noticed that her girlfriends didn't speak Mohawk. And the important part here wasn't quickly, it was, I noticed that they didn't speak Mohawk. Okay, that's her. Okay. So the question is, well, what's the essence of complementation anyway? Well, we know that sort of in general, matrix verbs have semantic scope over complements. And they're said to have illocutionary force, but actually, if we look at how the world works, that's pretty variable. More importantly, they have variable information value. So is the matrix always the most important information? Well, in Mohawk, that's kind of what they're doing. It's potentially reflected in prosody, erosion of substance. So if it's not very important, it gets lower and it can get smaller, okay? And when that happens with lots of frequency, it gets routinized, and that's the kind of thing that shapes grammar. So you get clauses turning into particles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now we're moving on to another language. This is Barbareño Chumash. Some communities call it Šmuwič, others don't. This is the Chumash language family. This is Santa Barbara right there. And there's Barbareño Chumash. Okay, it's not a bad place to live. What we know about Chumash, fortunately, it comes primarily, not entirely, but primarily from 3 speakers. So Kroeber was down in Santa Barbara and ran into Luisa Ignacio, started working with her, and John Peabody Harrington came along and said, hey, I could do a better job. So he jumped in as soon as Kroeber left and started working with Luisa Ignacio. And then he jumped in soon after that and worked with her daughter, Lucrecia, and then worked with her daughter, Mary Yee, who was an absolutely extraordinary person. And Harrington worked with her. I mean, he was, of course, employed by the Smithsonian, so he was jumping around doing a lot of stuff. He retired to Santa Barbara in 1952 and worked kind of 7 days a week, morning till night, with Mary Yee, which means that we have several 100,000 pages, manuscript pages of field notes. So there's a lot. He also, if he knew the meaning of something, he didn't bother to write the gloss. So it's a fairly challenging thing. There's John Peabody Harrington, there's Lucrecia, and there's Mary Yee. Mary Yee was the last speaker of any Chumash language, but she was an extraordinary speaker. She was a very bright woman. She was articulate. She was a good speaker of English and Spanish and Barbareño Chumash. Now, while Harrington was working with her, she was also keeping her own notebooks. And this is just what they looked like. Okay, so this is Mary Yee's notebook. It's quite interesting, actually, I think. All of them are interesting. She has drawings in there. She has little comments about Harrington. It's really wonderful stuff. Of course, this was early on. So, well, I should say that these are our major primary resources. There are a few more, mostly John Peabody Harrington, but then Madison Dealer came down from Berkeley and sort of had to slip in and secretly work with Mary, because John Peabody Harrington was very jealous and didn't want anybody else working with her. So he kind of slipped in, but he worked with her between 1954 and 1963. Very fortunately, University of California, Santa Barbara opened up a brand new state-of-the-art phonetics lab during that time. So he took her up there and recorded a little bit. So we know what all of the transcription, what the symbols really mean. I mean, we sort of knew anyway. Unfortunately, he didn't ask her to talk in the recordings. He had her read her notebooks. And so there's a lot we don't know about prosody, but there's a lot we do know. And I want to give special thanks to Suzanne Wash, because she was working on our Chumash language project and did beautiful work. Okay, so this language is basically predicate initial. So basically you start with a predicate. He prepared bugs for his mother-in-law to eat. everyday sentence. Okay, here you can hear why we don't get a lot of sentence prosody.
Sequelos iscom conenil sa uwe hosmos.
Okay, so it's very good for the sounds. Anyway, it's also kind of holophrastic, so you've got subject prefixes, object suffixes, like that. And it carefully marks dependency with this he. So basically you have a predicate and then everything else which is dependent is marked with a he. So arguments and complement clauses and relative clauses and all that stuff. Okay, so complement constructions. Here you can have a nice simple one. It started to rain, starts, that it rains. It's got very interesting tense stuff going on, but we're not going there. And here's one sentence where we can actually hear the prosody. So you can see it's one sentence, a single prosodic sentence. Okay, here's an object complement. They say that those people did not care much about salt. Okay, so it's, and you've got the dependency marker there. Very nice. But there are some surprises, okay? So how do you say, and pretty soon rain clouds would appear? Okay, well, this is part of a text. She said, Louisa, okay, that's what my mother said, listen to the frogs, it's going to rain. And pretty soon, okay, they arrive. So what's the matrix? It's quick. Okay, but that's not entirely surprising because the rain clouds, that's kind of already known. And so the quick part pretty soon is the important information. Okay. So she says, when a man sticks on a bronco horse, how do you say that? When it's good that he's on horseback, a man, then they say he's like a horsefly. Okay, they say that long ago the moon was brighter, but now it looks dim. So how do you say it looks dim? It's not very, that it's clear. Okay, so this is the matrix. He darts about. It's quick that he flies. Okay, this, yeah, they sip their soup noisily. She was talking about working for this family. See if you can imagine how she would have put that sentence, how she would have arranged the information. They were loud, that they sipped, it's broth, the boiled result, it's meat. Okay, so the matrix is the main point she's making. They're called different things. So this is, the stars still make lines painting things, but they're called different things from what they used to be called. See if you can imagine how she said that. They make them different, they call them. Okay, here she was talking about the fact that women got married very early and they were very young when they had children. And so often the kids didn't have to go out and play with other people. They're together, they play. Okay. He gets mad quickly. You can imagine what that is. He makes it quick, he gets mad. They talk the same way. Okay, she says, sometimes the people in a large rancheria and those living nearby, it's one that they talk. But generally each rancheria spoke a little differently. Okay, so this is the main point. So here, you don't get up for quite a while. To cure a cold, people would drink elderflower tea, sweat profusely, then go to bed. Okay, how do you think she says they don't get up for quite a while? It's a long time, you don't get up. So the going to bed was already pretty clear. Okay, they scurried right up, and tobacco juice and an amulet gave them strength. When one climbed a mountain, one touched it to one's lips. One did not make anything of it that one would climb up there. So this is the main information. Indian men do not say much. Okay, those Indian men, it's not much that they talk. They never paid attention to it. It didn't happen. They habitually paid attention. You're getting the gist. Okay, I like this one. How would she say he would never eat eggs again? She said, when a dog ate eggs, they would boil an egg and quickly plop it into his mouth, then hold his mouth closed for about a minute so that he doesn't again eat eggs. Okay, she'd already been talking about the eggs. So what's in the matrix? Pretty soon rain clouds would appear. It's quick. Man sticks on a bronco when it's good. It looks dim, not very. He darts about, it's quick. Sip their soup noisily, they were loud. Called different things, they make them different. Play together, they're together. Gets mad quickly, it's quick. You get the idea. Talk the same way, it's one. You don't get up for a while, it's quite long. They scurried right up, didn't make anything of it. Indian men don't say much, not much. Never eat eggs again. He doesn't do it again. Okay, so it's a lot like Mohawk. They're putting the most important information in the matrix. Now, Barbareño speakers also have alternatives. We don't have prosody, as you can see, but there's something else we can see. There are a lot of verb and prefix kind of doublets. So here's a verb to start. When they would start to pray, it's a verb to start. Jose Ignacio would stand up right away. So here we have this verb stem, and it's got a prefix start and stand. Okay, and how come this is a full verb and that's a prefix? Well, basically, this is a lexical item. So they formed one verb stem for stand up, starting to stand. So it looks like there was this pathway of development. This is very much an aerial thing. You have a moment or a long period of verb compounding, specifically word formation to form names for concepts. And then what happened through time is that the first root eroded into a prefix. So they have stuff like akni cho, to like persons, think, be good. Okay, these are lexicalized verb stems, so they're processed as chunks. Okay, and either element may no longer exist on its own. So that akni, mentally, think thing, we find it in the verb to pay attention to, but we don't know what the other part means on its own because it doesn't occur anymore on its own. To desire, to want, you can sort of see the mentally, but nobody knows what the wuss is. To be sad, yeah, that's mentally, but what's the kosh? Okay, then we have, here's another complex one, to chip flint or nap flint. We know the root to strip off. So what's the ulu? Well, to follow behind, we know the akpe, to stick to. And this to plug up, to stop up, we know this stop up, but we don't really know this ulu by itself. So basically things get processed as chunks, another kind of cognitive thing that happens. Okay, now here's this matrix verb, Šmuwič, be quick. Then after bathing the cut, it's good to sprinkle dried leaves of the hare's ear plant on it, so it will heal promptly, so it will be quick that it heals. There's a prefix, api, quickly. He took that drink, he quickly drank it. Okay, now speakers do more than just sort of chunk things. They also, on some level, recognize patterns and extend them analogically to new formations. So that api, quickly, shows up in all kinds of verbs all over the place. So speakers are clearly extending their knowledge by analogy. Does it matter? Yeah, I think it does. Vocabulary, including morphologically complex lexical items, provides a record of the concepts that speakers have considered name-worthy over centuries of development. And it shows what they viewed as criterial features. So you look at the pieces, if you're a linguist, and you say, aha, when they put this together, what they saw as the significant defining parts are those parts. Some are very common cross-linguistically, others are more cultural specific, and that's a very important part of cultural heritage. So it's something that we really want to revere and respect. Okay, one last example, Central Alaskan Yup'ik. Okay, that's the family, and there's Central Alaskan Yup'ik, southwestern Alaska. It's a very different kind of landscape. It's polysynthetic, it's holophrastic, it's got pronominal suffixes in the verbs. It's basic verb final order, but it's fluid, and all verbs and nouns have only one root, and then they have potentially a lot of suffixes or not, and they always have an inflectional ending. Okay, and sure, we can find prototypical complement constructions here too. Then he saw that he had finished the wild rhubarb. Nice complement construction. We've got this object clause. Here you've got different mood markers helping you with subordination. And it's got the prosody. So single prosodic sentence, steady declination in pitch. Yeah, you can hear it. It's nice. And that's George. Okay. But all complement constructions don't have the same prosody, no surprise. It's just like Mohawk. The matrix prosody varies with the information value at the moment. Okay, so here's a matrix verb, say. And so they would say, indeed, up above, there are those people who left through the upper door. Okay, they would say it, and here's the complement clause. But look, here the matrix is low, and it's less dynamic. It's just kind of flat. And then the complement is much more dynamic, and it's much higher. But that's the main point of what she was trying to say. Yeah, that's Liz. Okay, here's a matrix verb, think, but some of them, they thought that it was time to go back to Yupik country. Okay, so yeah, nice complement construction. What's the main information? Well, this is a different topic shift, but here we've got the low matrix and then the higher complement. Believe, same deal. People have always believed that this land is inhabited by many people and spirits. Okay, lower matrix, higher complement, because this is what she was, her main message. But if you sort of look at what people really do when they're left to their own devices, there aren't that many complement constructions in spontaneous speech. It's kind of shocking. Actually, a lot of things that are matrix verbs in other languages have suffix counterparts in Yupik. So remember in Mickey Noonan's classes of complement-taking verbs, 8 of his 11 have suffix counterparts in Yupik. Okay, so for example, think. Those people thought I was stupid. Okay, of course the main thing is stupid, not thought I was stupid, but thought I was stupid. She was not stupid. Okay, here's say, this is a suffix. They said he'd left. Here's request. They asked them to come to their house, request go. Okay, here's try. In the summer, he was talking about his father would take care of the dogs, trying to fatten them up. Every day my father would give them water, feed them, and cook for them. Yeah. Should, be able to, no surprise, these are suffixes. It would be good if you were able to come here. We'll be able to drift net. She was talking on the phone. Not know whether, okay. Prevent. Stephen Jacobson has done an incredible dictionary, absolutely magnificent dictionary, and he lists about 500 of these derivational, these post bases, these suffixes. And we can see that a lot of them are descended from the second element of compounds. So you have things that originated as verb-verb compounds and are now verb suffixes. And because a lot of them still have quite lexical meanings. Here's a sample. She says, I'm still cooking for them, her grown children. Here you have the root is food, the suffix is prepare, okay, but you can see that's a kind of a noun verb thing. And her daughter says, yeah, because we really love your meals. Okay, here we have what would have been a noun, I think. And then we have verb. Okay, now what's also interesting, you get the stem suffix routinization. So things that are just frequently processed together are single chunks, like we love to eat them. Okay, but what's also happened in this language is that suffixes that occur together a lot also get routinized as chunks. So she says, I want to go fishing, but I no longer want to go down. You can hear this. because the ice looks dangerous. This want to is a suffix, and this without expectation of appropriate outcome. So that's kind of a piece now. And here, I no longer want to. So this is the desiderative want, having, lack, or yeah, okay. So things that get said together a lot get routinized as chunks. So what does this all mean? Well, this is about the value of differences. We're always wondering, what are the universals of human language? How much is in innate design features? How much is shaped by more general human cognition? We've seen a lot of that here, routinizing, etc. How much is shaped by human action, interaction, and there are all kinds of dimensions to that. Some of what we've seen here is managing the flow of information, thinking about where people's minds are when they're listening. For communities, differences can be a living testament to a unique heritage, to traditional patterns of thought, to the heart of ongoing culture. They can enrich community resources for fostering respect and appreciation of their specialness. And for new speakers, they can be integral to native-like fluency. So if you really want to carry on your traditions, you want to know not just what the structures are, but how people put their thoughts into them. For everybody, I think if we pay a lot of attention to spontaneous speech in use, we can move beyond checking existing hypotheses to looking carefully at what speakers actually do, why, and how often. And sometimes we discover the unexpected. So we get, if we're only asking questions that we're expecting a yes, no, or ABC answer to, we won't be surprised. But if we really look carefully at what people are doing, we can come up with new, interesting questions and answers. Also, no single language is going to sort of show you trajectories of development through all of time. And of course, if we want to figure out, explain things, we very often, the only way to do this is to know how things got to be that way. So explanation isn't always there on the surface. And we don't often find full trajectories of development within a single language, because these kinds of, grammatical constructions can get formed over centuries or millennia. But each language can give us some snapshots of the development of structure in context. And so if we look very carefully, we can push back the boundaries of the arbitrary. We just need to listen. That's it. Okay.
Well, thank you, Marianne, for that very rich and compelling talk. Very interesting, to be sure. We now have some time for questions, and I would ask that you put your questions into the Q&A field. There's a button at the bottom of the bottom center of the Zoom screen. If you click on it, it gives you an opportunity to type in questions. And I'm hoping that some of you will have questions. We have some comments in chat, which are certainly worth reading aloud. Thank you, Marianne. I agree with that. Cool stuff. Thank you. Brava. Yes, definitely. Wonderful framing. So it sounds like you really hit the target. Well, here's a question now in the Q&A. Oh, Lisa Men. Thank you, Lisa, saying that was fun and really interesting. So
okay.
more a comment than a question, but
that's great. Thank you, guys.
I have maybe I'll ask a question myself just to give you a chance to flex your muscles a bit. I notice with regard to your terminology that you use complement, matrix and complement, and I wonder if you had in mind a distinction between that type of terminology and the more traditional terminology of main clause and subordinate clause, or are they just terminological issues, or just what?
Oh, thanks a lot, Brian. So I was using complement as sort of a subcategory of subordinate. So just looking at when it's functioning is the core argument of a matrix clause. So not looking at adverbial clauses, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And it's a good thing we killed some time there, because now we have several questions. Sue Steele asks, would any of your conclusions about Mohawk change if the analysis were a string of clauses rather than main clause and embedded clause?
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually taking a lot of the structure off the prosody. So that's the main thrust here. Often sort of a classical way of looking at that is illocutionary force. So if you said that's not true, you know, what is it you're not talking about? But in English, if you say, you know, oh, I think he's here, you're not saying that's not true, you don't think that. And I would say the same is true for Mohawk. That's a good question. Yeah, I would say the prosody really, prosody is one, but also the people that I work with, I always work with speakers. I wouldn't want to do this on my own because I'd miss this. I mean, I could do it on my own and then who knows what I'd miss. These translations came from speakers. So I think that's another kind of a cue that they're translating them as single sentences. Thanks, that's a good point.
Next in the Q&A actually is a comment from Nancy Hedberg. Thank you so much. This is a recurring theme. This will be so gratifying to share with our Coast Salish linguistics students here in British Columbia.
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. And of course, there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on in Salish and about dependent clauses and what's happened to them and how that's affected the grammar. I mean, that's really
Claire Bowen says, great talk, and then asks, could you talk more about the relationship between intonation and routinization? That is, do you see a link between the predominant intonation patterns between main and subordinate clauses and the likelihood that matrix verbs end up as affixes?
Thank you. I think actually that's a really nice observation. And there's more to it than that. So yeah, I think the ones that have low prosody are the ones and high frequency. So they've got to have both low prosody. So meaning not that much, that's not the main point. And high frequency can lead to this reduction, and that over time can give you affixes essentially. So it can go to say particles and then go to affixes. And so I think that's true. I think actually a lot of North America, not uniquely at all, in a number of cases, that's not how the affixes got there actually within the verbs. I think instead of sort of shriveling down and becoming particles and then, or maybe even, you know, sort of auxiliaries and particles and then clitics and then affixes. What happened was that they jumped in by compounding. So verb-verb compounding, noun-verb compounding, even noun-noun compounding. And then they formed these complex, actually in most cases, well, it depends on the language, but in these languages, I'm looking at complex verb stems, and then basically just one of the original roots or stems sort of eroded in place. But what that means is in these languages, you still have affixes that have very concrete meanings, meaning that they were fairly recently stems in the grand scheme of things. So, I mean, like in Yup'ik, you have suffixes that mean things like to buy and to wear and to catch that go with game. All kinds of really concrete things, which suggests they didn't sort of erode via auxiliaries and then all these kinds of things. They were kind of jumped in there. Often, too, in these situations, you have big inventories of these affixes, which means that at the moment they were sort of fused in compound constructions. The speakers kind of had the whole lexicon to choose from, rather than just the ones that had eroded. So thanks, Claire. That's a really nice question.
John Baugh asks, your languages and populations are endangered. The work of Boas and Sapir echo in your studies, but what of the future? What are the challenges for those who want to do this type of work in the future?
Oh, thanks a lot, John. I've got to say something about Mohawks. Mohawks are absolutely astonishing. They're absolutely incredible. You got a little taste of what the language looks like. I didn't go into gory details, but like the pronominal prefixes, there's 60 some of those, and each of those has like 5 allomorphs depending on what it's, I mean, there's a lot of complexity there. In the beginning of the 70s, the Mohawk sort of woke up one morning and noticed the kids weren't speaking Mohawk. And they were quite surprised, and they decided something should be done. So they went into the schools and tried to teach, very good speakers. It was still spoken really well. And the kids still didn't speak. They'd say, you know, pine tree, but the kids weren't speakers. So they decided they should really get going. And that's when they asked me to come and help them. And these guys are totally amazing. And it's a long story, and I won't go into the gory details, but they ultimately established immersion schools. So now kids in, I think, all 6 communities, their parents can choose whether the kids are going to go to school in English or in Mohawk. And the kids who go to school in Mohawk are outperforming the kids who go to school in English. It's the bilingual. And then these kids who graduated, they've been doing that for quite a while, they sort of said, hey, we miss our Mohawk. The kids were really spearheaded work to get adult immersion programs going. They found the money. And so now, the first year they said, okay, people can sign up for adult immersion. Basically, it's a job. You sign up for a year, 5 days a week, business hours, you get a little salary to support your family, and it's a year of Mohawk. And they've been doing this, and now there's year 1 and year 2, and they are producing fluent second language Mohawk speakers. Nobody would have ever thought it could happen, especially with Mohawk. These guys are stunning. They're absolutely stunning. They're smart. They're motivated. So this is like just amazing. And I think they're a kind of a beacon of hope for all of this. But I got to say another thing, you know, when a community is just starting, you're just starting out trying to say, okay, what do I do? Do I teach them all the animal names and maybe some food names? And what linguists can be doing is really just good documentation of good speakers speaking. So I think that's really, really important. If there's a role for linguists, it's to appreciate what speakers do. And not spend their time, especially with languages in fragile situations, not maybe waste the time of really good speakers looking to prove a theory as much as just appreciating what they're doing and trying to do it justice.
Well, we're running a little short on time, but we have 5 questions in the queue. Well, maybe we can get through all of them and then break for our reception, our presidential reception. Arthur Spears asks, incredibly insightful material. Did cultural linguistics and or cognitive linguistics, for instance, Langaker's, influence your line of research, or was it mostly the languages themselves that mostly led you to your insights?
Thank you, Arthur. I got to say, I've got a quote, Dale Kincaid, who says, "The language made me do it." Yeah, you know, you get into the middle of these languages and they're so amazing that it comes out of the languages. It didn't come top down. I mean, I had to know, you know, basic phonology, morphology, syntax, etc., to be able to transcribe, but yeah.
Okay, Keith Tse asks, thank you very much. You made a distinction in line with traditional literature, for instance, Noonan, between nominal and clausal arguments, the latter termed complements. You've also shown convincingly that there are key differences between nouns and clauses in object position. Do you have any more insights on the uniqueness of clausal arguments or complements, which, though being arguments of verbs and predicates, seem to have unique properties which set them apart from object nouns?
Well, thank you. I think that this was a language-specific issue. And the thing about Mohawk, especially to some extent the other languages, but maybe Mohawk more, is there are hardly any real nouns in the language. And so basically when somebody wants to talk about something, they do it with a verb, and then verbs get lexicalized sort of along a continuum for being very verby and used like predicates all the time to being used more referentially. So in Mohawk, there really isn't a sharp distinction. It's very interesting. There are a few nouns. I mean, there's nouns for rock and ice, but most things are actually originated as verbs.
Great. A question from Jorge Roses Larada. Thank you, Marianne. This is great. I was wondering if you notice anything special about utterance type matrix verbs. In the Amazonian languages I work with, and many others for that in the area, these are used to introduce complements of quoted speech rather than reported speech, like English would, for example.
Oh, that's nice, Jorge. Yeah, I know about your work. No, I haven't seen that kind of thing, actually. I should say that people don't order other people around as much in any of these languages. There's a lot of concern for courtesy and treating people well. And in fact, I think for Yupik, there is a form, but when I was asking when it would be used, I mean, the only time it would be used is, you know, you're getting your dog to, hey, get out of here, or maybe a kid who's really truculent, you want to say, okay, come on, sit down. But people don't do that, and they don't, I mean, there are forms, and they're perfectly good forms, but they don't say, you know, they say it would be nice if, or perhaps one might, or would you be so kind as to. So it's very much a cultural difference. I think that's pretty interesting.
The next question from Cynthia Hansen is seems related sort of as a follow-up. It seemed that a number of the matrix verbs that you presented are in semantic categories not represented in Noonan's typology. Based on your work, would you add any semantic categories to the typology of complementizing verbs?
Oh, that's a nice question. Yeah, the point is they weren't there. My thought is that the principles sort of underlying what people are putting in matrix clauses is the variable here. So it's not just scope, semantic scope, whereas in other languages, it's probably, I mean, a lot of languages, it's more semantic scope. Here, it's really information value at the moment. So in a way, it's a deeper principle, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice
And the last question from Andres Kutsi, big picture question. So this will keep you going for a while, Marianne. What is the relationship between a deep dive into a single language and a more flyover comparative view? How should we structure linguistic curricula to make the kind of work that you do possible? Or, in other words, how do we make sure that this kind of work is possible for the next and next generation of linguists?
Oh, Andres, I think that's a really nice point. That's sort of the point right there, the question right there. I think that's really a nice point. I think for training, we want to train our students to be sharp, to know what exists out there. So, I mean, can you imagine you hit an ergative language and nobody ever told you about ergativity? So you're kind of swimming around and saying, my goodness, where is this? I mean, what happened to my subjects? And I don't know what's going on, etc. So I think for good training, we want our subjects to be able to, I mean, our students to be able to spot things right away, and also spot what isn't part of what they already knew. Because especially now, we don't want to waste speakers' time. I mean, languages are changing very, very fast, even languages with a lot of speakers. And so, you know, in some situations, we're losing first language speakers very fast. But something like this, you know, where you put your information, actually, that's something that's very, very fragile under language contact. I mean, you can easily see that people could feel like they're speaking Mohawk and all the words are Mohawk and it's all grammatical, but it would be very easy for them to start arranging their sentences according to English thought patterns. So that's a really good point, Andre. So I think, yeah, for training, we want to train our students in what we know is out there, but kind of, I think our good discoveries don't come from checking stuff, they come from documentation. And, you know, so maybe a really linguist kind of has a good idea about what's known, and then just sits and lets people do what they do and watches and then says, whoa, nobody knew that before, or hey, we can move this ahead this way. I think that's a nice point.
Well, that's maybe a good point to end on. So let's all thank Marianne. I don't know whether you can see applause, but here's my big applause to you. That's wild applause breaking out. We are now at this point we move to the presidential reception, which will be, of course, virtual this year, but it will still be pleasant and fun, and everyone is invited. David Robinson of the LSA just put into the chat the link for the presidential reception. Just click on the link, enable your camera and microphone, and you're all set. And all sorts of people are in the chat are saying thank you, Marianne. They just keep coming. They just keep rolling on and on and on. So it was a wonderful presidential address. I'm honored to have been a part of it in a small way.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay, so I'll see you all at the reception where Marianne will preside.